welcome. You're watching Be the People. I'm Rishika Barua. As Wayanad picks up the pieces in the aftermath of one of the most deadly tragedies the state has seen, the recent landslides, the images of death, destruction and devastation serve as a lasting reminder of the fact that we now live in the age of climate change, the impact of which has been made a whole lot worse by unchecked and at times ruthless development. Those who saw it coming were silenced as being anti-people. But in the battle between lives and livelihoods, we may have picked the latter, but today hundreds are dead and hundreds more still missing. And this is the story of Wayanad alone. One wonders who or what at this juncture is really anti-people. It's been 13 years since an expert panel led by senior ecologist Madhav Gadgil submitted his report recommending that 75% of the entire Western Ghats region be declared as an ecologically sensitive zone and that all development work be regulated by an ecological authority in the region, not necessarily the government. The government thought that this is going to make a parallel government, and therefore the report, which almost rings prophetic today, had listed out all of these dangers region by region. This report, if it had been implemented, could have potentially saved hundreds of lives. The report was, of course, met with stiff political resistance and protests that led to the setting up of another expert panel under K. Kasturirangan, which also made recommendations on the ecologically sensitive Western Ghat region. The report had called for 37% of all Ghats to be brought under ecologically sensitive zone and all construction and development activity to be closely restricted and regulated. That report too, till date, remains a piece of paper. Whether it is Himachal Pradesh, whether it is Uttarakhand, or whether it is a tragedy that we're seeing in Kerala, the fallen trees, the cut up mountains are now closing in on us. This is a story that is panning out across India. The question is, are we prepared to sow what we reap? Joining me on the show tonight, Amitabh Kant, former head of the Niti Aayog, also India's G20 Sherpa, Madhav Gadgil, the ecologist and the author of the damning Madhav Gadgil report that has resurfaced in the light of this tragedy. We'll also be joined by Akhilesh Anil Kumar, one of Kerala's youth climate leaders who was picked up by the UN for its We the Campaign Change. We'll be joined by other panelists as well. But let me first go across to Amitabh Kant. At the moment, Mr. Khan, thanks very much for speaking with NDTV. Given the fact that we have these prophetic reports like the Madhav Gadgil report that, like I said, remain pieces of paper, my question to you is very simple. Could this tragedy have been averted?
Of course, it could have been averted because this is one of the world's 8 hottest biodiversity hotspots. This forms a part of an area which is very, very unique in terms of the Kabani and the Chaliar River originate from there. The area is full of biological reserves. It has wildlife sanctuaries. It has a number of national parks. And the challenge as far as Wayanad, I see it, is that in the 1950s, almost 85% of Wayanad was green forest. Between 1950, as one of the studies, a recent study has shown, between 1950 to 2018, 62% of the green forest has disappeared, and that has been replaced by plantation crops. It is the plantation crops during 1950 to 2018 have increased by 1,800%. That is rubber, coffee, tea, all of them have increased. Now, plantation crops are very ineffective in holding soil, and they are, if you compare them to dense forest, that's almost like a devastation to that area. And the other thing that has happened is that if you look at nearly half of Kerala's comprises of hills and mountain regions where slopes actually exceed 20 degrees. And therefore, it makes Kerala and other hilly areas also more prone to landslides. And therefore, whatever we do in these areas, you need to be very sure of the carrying capacity. What I have seen in Wayanad in recent years is that there has been a huge mushrooming of tourism resorts
Right.
without any carrying capacity studies. There have been roads which have been constructed, tunnels which have been dug.
Right.
There has been massive quarrying activities, and all this has impacted the region in a very big way.
Yes.
So my view strongly has been that we should have taken the recommendations of the Gadgil committee very seriously, and Kerala is very, very unique. It's very unique, and whatever we do, we should take carrying capacities into consideration. We should build infrastructure which is very climate resilient. We should be very careful about and do very serious evaluation when doing land use changes, because any major land use changes that you do will lead to landslides and flash floods. So these are very, very critical areas. And I really personally feel very devastated, because I was collector of the neighboring district, Calicut, which was adjoining
Yes.
Wayanad. And Wayanad has actually a huge history, and it was remarkably pristine. It was remarkably green. It was remarkably it's a very unique destination, and therefore we should have
Yes.
been far more careful, and we need to be very, very careful about undertaking any construction, any further roads, or any further tunnels which have to be made in that area.
Right.
That will have very severe repercussions on Wayanad in the future.
Okay. Well, this is not a Wayanad story alone, and irrespective of which political party has been in power, whether it's Kerala, Uttarakhand or Himachal Pradesh, protecting the ecology has always been looked at and branded anti-people. These two reports that we just talked about were essentially never put into place because they were anti-people. How can we change that mindset?
No, these reports are not anti-development. They are, they take a long-term perspective. They are pro in many ways. Gadgil committee reports, etc. They're based on scientific studies, and therefore we need to build consensus around them. And that's very important, because whatever we do, the challenge for us is that development and sustainability have to go hand in hand. We can't do reckless construction. We can't be building roads. We can't be building tunnels. We can't be doing quarrying activities in these areas, which are very eco-sensitive. These are one of the finest hotspots of the world, biodiversity hotspots of the world. And the more we do it, we'll leave nothing for future generations. We'll destroy them. And that is why there's a huge warming in the Arabian Sea, which is leading to huge rainfalls in these areas, and therefore leading to massive landslides.
Yes.
And to my mind, all of us need to build political and administrative consensus for the people of that region,
right,
for the sake of development of India, that we don't do reckless construction without taking carrying capacity into consideration.
Okay. It's very interesting that you talk about the warming of the Arabian Sea, because of course what we are seeing is nothing but the impact of climate change. But what's really devastating is that it's being made a whole lot worse by us, by people. Like the UN chief said, climate crisis is slipping down a very crowded global agenda. You also wear the hat of the G20 Sherpa. I want to understand from you, how can we make this agenda number one?
So, in all these Western Ghat regions, also hilly areas of Uttarakhand and Himachal, we need to be extremely sensitive to and make sure that all development is sustainable in nature. We can't have mass tourism in these areas. We need to be very, very careful. Whatever we do has to be, and I've always believed this. Kerala tourism was a very unique study of high value tourism, of doing away with mass tourism, because mass tourism has very detrimental impact in terms of construction,
Yes.
in terms of loss of cultural values, in terms of loss of local ethos. So I've always believed that the world of tourism is also moving towards being extremely sensitive, and people across the world, high value tourists who go, want to give to the destinations rather than take from it, in terms of culture, in terms of ecotourism, in terms of responsible tourism. And therefore, what these destinations should look for is very low footprints, very low human footprints. And we need to build consensus that very little of construction, just about no, and that'll add greater value to my mind if you do, compatible development. And if you are able to ensure that all development which is done, it takes into consideration the fact that these are very, very sensitive areas prone to landslides and prone to flash floods. And therefore, we need to do everything which is compatible to sustainability in these areas. And, and political consensus is critical for that. Yes. And I think the challenge for political parties is that they must build consensus on all these critical and important areas of development.
Yes, but I also want to ask you, a day after these landslides swept the Wayanad region, the union government has now for the 6th time issued a draft notification to declare, over 55,000 square kilometers of the Western Ghats across these 6 states, including Kerala, of course, as ecologically sensitive area. But the truth is, on the ground, when it comes to political parties or when it comes to governments, in the lives versus livelihoods debate, it's always the latter that has won. And that's something we haven't been able to change or fight on the ground.
So, to my mind, saving lives is critical. Therefore, in these regions, we need to do more of reforestation. We need to do more of sustainable agriculture. We need to do more of value addition on agriculture rather than changing the very basic nature of land cultivation by switching over to plantation crops. Plantation crops will do immense damage to soil conservation in that region. Right. And therefore, sustainable agriculture and reforestation is the way forward.
All right. Amitabh Kant, thank you very much for your time. Some very important points that he makes there in terms of how this is a tragedy that could have essentially been avoided, and also how the balance between lives and livelihoods is one that we're just going to have to strike sooner rather than later. So a lot of insights there into the ecological fragility of Kerala. But who better than Madhav Gadgil himself to answer some questions? Thank you very much, sir, for speaking with NDTV. Sincerely appreciate the time. I want to begin by asking you your 2011 report, where you'd proposed to categorize the Western Ghats as ecologically sensitive areas to restrict and regulate activities. Your recommendations were not accepted. Looking back now, today, do you think that Wayanad is a disaster that could have been averted?
I mean, you cannot say stop for sure, but certainly their frequency, their intensity would have been reduced. That I can say with certainty. Okay.
But, your report was completely accurate, at least in terms of Wayanad, in the areas that you predicted would be, worst hit are some of the worst hit areas today. Do you think that the demarcations that you came up with in 2011, and that report's been in limbo for 13 years now, should be put in place even today?
Not just Wayanad, after all. Actually, certainly all of Western Ghats everywhere. In Maharashtra, for example, there have been landslides which have buried whole villages and killed large number of people, not quite on the scale that now has happened in this Wayanad incident, but nearly on similar sort of scales. And it is actually the kind of unnecessary infrastructural activities that are going on. One of my geologist friend in Pune has made a careful study, not of just big landslides, but all scale landslides, and shown that between 2011 to 2020, 100-fold increase in landslides at various scales in Maharashtra Western Ghats. So this is something which we should be careful about and not Go ahead. I mean, details can be given about how the road building and railways and so on, how they have
Yes.
recklessly destroyed the environment, which was not at all necessary. They
Yes.
could have done it carefully.
Okay, so there is a way to do it. This has obviously not been the best way. Anybody who's read your report or read any article has said that your report almost is prophetic when it comes to what's happened in Wayanad today. Thank you so much for joining us, Madhav Gadgil. We'll of course we'll of course keep looking at whether or not the government does anything about your report 13 years ago that still just remains essentially a piece of paper. Also joining me tonight on We the People, Akhilesh Anil Kumar. He is Kerala's youth climate leader picked by the United Nations as a part of its We the Change campaign. We have KT Ravindran, an urban planning expert, and Malika Bhanot, member of the Ganga Ahvan in Uttarakhand, because remember, this is not a Kerala story alone. I want to first begin by asking you, KT Ravindran, a whole host of lessons and learning now. We're given to understand that the government has once again issued a notification to declare, Western Ghats, a certain portion, as ecologically sensitive. Do you believe this is too little, too late, or anything that we can still manage to do will be something that that will perhaps be looked at as salvaging in the future?
Well, if you put it like this or that, I think both are correct.
Right.
In the sense that we have done enough destruction already, but there is a lot more to be saved. So it's not that we have destroyed everything and there's no future. There certainly is a future. And towards that, any new declaration will actually be helpful. The problem in Kerala has been that if you look at the geological conditions of Kerala, you have a linear state, and to the east is the Western Ghats, and to the west is the Arabian Sea. Yeah? On one hand, we have increased global warming, and due to this warming, there is a higher precipitation rate,
yes,
and therefore higher rainfall, and that rainfall is kept captive by the clouds are kept captive, yes, by the mountain ranges, and the waters always flow down from east to west.
Right.
Okay. Kerala has a contiguous slope from east to west, and on the west we have the Arabian Sea.
But I'm gonna just interrupt you there, because a lot of experts, including yourselves, have explained that, and viewers have read it, and we've understood what has happened. Are we any better prepared to deal with what's to come?
Yes, we are certainly quite prepared on many ways, because there are a large number of agencies which are working on climate issues in Kerala itself. And the Disaster Management Authority in Kerala has mapped all the vulnerable areas, right, in Kerala. The information exists, everything is digitally available.
Okay.
But the unfortunate thing is that there is no link between the planning efforts, okay, which are being made at state level and this information base.
All right.
So the link, if this link is established, then we'll have a proper planning taking place on a scientific basis.
Well, a lot of that planning clearly still needs to happen, and it may exist on paper, but how much of it is actually being implemented on the ground? I think that's the question that we really need to ask. Akhilesh, I want to bring you into the conversation as a young climate activist from Kerala. Many say that they saw this coming, and several of those reports, like we said, exist on paper. But what is happening on the ground, and this is not a Kerala story alone, is that while climate change is real, our contribution to making these tragedies worse for ourselves is also very real. How prepared do you think we are to take on the climate challenge in the future, whether it's in Kerala or anywhere else in the country?
Thank you for having me. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are. Please go ahead.
I think, when we're talking, we are pretty underprepared from what we are seeing happening right now, especially in Kerala. From my journey starts from 2018 floods, where we saw almost 500 people dying in devastating incidents all across the state. Now, coming forward a few years, now we are seeing around 360 plus people already died and another almost 300 people missing. And in this period of time, we have seen many such disasters coming back, hitting the state as well. And this is just in the case of Kerala, but when you look at international level, there's been multiple calls for action. And
Yes.
I don't think this is just one call for action to wake up, but there has been multiple wake-up calls that we have seen throughout the past few years, and establishing that definitely this is climate change, and climate change is, bringing a huge impact.
And it's here to stay.
Across. And it's just to say, unless we are going to take rigorous policy interventions and actions across the map. And there's one thing I think that's missing out of this conversation, which is the human impact of this conversation. You're seeing the dialogue, which is being talked about, how climate change and how all these the committee reports and everything is being brought into picture. But when we look at 300 plus people or 360 people dying, there's a huge impact there. In terms of how the mental health of all these people are, how they have actually uprooted their whole lives, their livelihood, the dreams that they have built up over the course of several decades. And now the main issue there is, when you look at India, the rehabilitation takes almost 8 years or more when you look at several reports, while comparing to other countries, it's just 8 months or maybe a year.
Yes. No, I mean, I don't know if you joined in, but I actually asked Mr. Amitabh Kant this question, that how do you balance lives and livelihoods? Because right now lives are being lost only because livelihoods have been put higher than saving lives, potentially because of natural disasters or potentially because of, man-made disasters, however you want to look at them. So we have addressed that, and we obviously can't underscore the importance of that more. But Malika Bhanot, it's very nice of you to join this conversation, because like I've been saying from the beginning of the show, this is not a Kerala story alone. This is a story that concerns all of us across the country, particularly, the hill states. Look at what's happening in Himachal and Uttarakhand even now. Clearly, we just move on from tragedy to tragedy, and nothing seems to change on the ground because no projects are being stalled as a result of impending disasters.
Exactly. As I remember last time that I had come to you, we were again discussing some kind of disasters, and disasters have such short-lived memories. Every time there is a disaster, there is a discussion, and all of us who are concerned, we raise our voices, and then everything just basically dies its own death. As you have already mentioned, all of that is essentially, there are several reports on paper. There are, in cases of Uttarakhand, right from 1970s, I can quote Mishra Commission, to the recent reports, nothing has been implemented, nothing has been followed. As a result of this, we have Joshimath disaster, we have 2013 Kedarnath tragedy. After that, we have submissions from Ministry of Environment agreeing that the infrastructure projects accentuated, they actually escalated the impact of the disaster. So my 2 cents to this conversation, since you've already covered many points, is to understand that the infrastructure projects, 2 things. The infrastructure projects are accentuating the impact of the disasters. That is very important conclusion to understand, that why is it we need to regulate development? And secondly, it is not lives versus livelihoods, because the lives we have, it is criminal negligence if we cannot prevent these disasters from happening. Because these disasters are claiming lives. People are dying. So it's not a question about lives versus livelihoods now. It's our survival is at stake. So
but
it's that kind of an urgency
even though we've
right
seen
now.
so many of these tragedies, and you've been on shows with me in the past where we've talked about this, it's not like those environment assessment reports or the impact assessment reports are still being read or considered seriously. It hasn't stalled a single project, like I said, and that is why we are having to have these conversations on whether we're ready to deal with the impact of climate change or not.
We are so not ready, because the only preparedness that can actually be there with any kind of government, state or central, is to prevent these impending disasters. Just to prepare a report and just to keep talking about it is not going to help. And also I would like to point out that, for people who feel that development is so important, I don't know why is it that they feel that the eco-sensitive zone declaration is going to be anti-developmental. Eco-sensitive zone, for example, actually divides all the activities in a region into prohibited, regulated and promoted. So you have like a huge scope for localized development, for decentralized development, vis-a-vis environmental conservation. This whole idea that, your infrastructure, if you're not allowing large-scale infrastructure, you are preventing development. This is traditional thought which needs to go away. Because
Mr.
I mean, right now we are literally surviving. I mean, Chardham, if you see, for
Yes.
example, what is happening.
Yes.
Several landslides have been triggered in the Garhwal area, most vulnerable area. We have already witnessed what happened in Himachal last year, what happens in Northeast, now in
Yes.
Jammu and Kashmir, now in Western Ghats. I mean, what more examples do we require?
Well, I don't
And
think we
every
need.
time we
I don't think we need any more warnings or any more wake-up calls. I think what we need on the ground is action, and I think this is something that this tragedy has highlighted. You know, I thank you all very much for your time, for joining us on this edition of We the People. I'm afraid that's all the time we have tonight. If you have tuned in, good night and thanks for watching.